And so, we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy, in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story that begins not with the clash of swords or the fanfare of trumpets, but in the deep, suffocating quiet of a single, small room, with a secret that is growing louder every day. All right, let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing, and together, let's allow the story to begin. You are sitting on the edge of a narrow, lumpy mattress. The floorboards are cold beneath your bare feet, and you've pulled a thin, scratchy wool shawl tight around your shoulders, though it does little to fight off the damp chill that seems to seep from the very walls of this London boarding house. Outside your window, a gas lamp sputters, cast in a weak, flickering orange light that dances with the shadows in your tiny room. The air is thick with the smell of the city, a permanent cocktail of cool smoke, damp earth, and the distant, ever-present scent of the river. Your hands rest on your lap, one cupping the other, but your mind is focused entirely on the space just beneath them. There, under the coarse fabric of your dress and the rigid, unforgiving hollow bone of your corset, is the secret. It's a secret that has been growing for months now, a quiet hum of terror that is quickly becoming a shout. At first, it was easy to ignore, a simple mistake, a foolish moment of warmth with a man whose face is already starting to fade from your memory. A month passes, then two. You tell yourself it's the stress of your work at the draper's shop, the long hours and the poor food. You pull your corset laces a little tighter each morning, the sharp pinch a welcome distraction. But now, there is no more denying it. There is a gentle, but insistent, rounding of your belly that no amount of lacing can conceal for much longer. You are a young woman, unmarried, and with no prospects to speak of, and in this world, this righteous, God-fearing Victorian world, your secret isn't just a mistake. It is a sentence. It is ruin, absolute and complete. You've seen what happens. You saw it happen to Polly, a girl who worked in the laundry. The whispers that followed her down the street like stray dogs. The way her landlady left her trunk on the pavement in the rain. The final, hollow look in her eyes before she simply disappeared. No one asked where she went. No one wanted to know. To be an unwed mother is to become a ghost before you are even dead. Your lodgings, your character, the doors of polite society, doors you were barely allowed to peek through anyway, are slammed shut and bolted forever. Your family, if they are even still in the picture, would cast you out to protect their own fragile name. You would be utterly, terrifyingly alone. This is the reality that presses in on you, more constricting than any corset. You feel a flutter, deep inside, a tiny, innocent movement that feels like a death knell. It is the strangest, most awful feeling, a deep, primal love for the life you are carrying, tangled up with the cold, hard certainty that this very life will destroy your own. Historians still gently argue about this moment, about the psychology of a woman in your position. They debate the line between being a victim of a brutal system and the desperate, frantic agency you must now find. You are trapped, but you are not passive. Your mind is racing, sifting through the impossible, the unthinkable. What do you do? Where do you go? The secret is getting bigger. Time is running out, and with every tick of the cheap clock on the mantelpiece, the silence in your little room feels less like peace and more like the calm before a devastating storm. The storm has a name, of course. In fact, it has several, as you sit there, the cold seeping into your bones. Your mind frantically sketches out the map of your own destruction, and you see 3 paths leading from this room. All of them end in a place you cannot bear to imagine. The first path, the most well-trodden and the most dreaded, leads to a pair of tall, iron gates. Behind them stands a vast, imposing brick building, its windows like 100 vacant eyes staring down at the city as forgotten. The workhouse, they call it the Puer Bastille, and for good reason. It is a prison for the crime of being poor. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. The moment you cross that threshold, you cease to be you. Your clothes are taken, replaced with a coarse, shapeless uniform of rough spun wool that scratches at your skin. Your name is written in a ledger, and you become a number. You are separated from everyone you know. And your child would be taken from you. They would be placed in the infant nursery, a place run with cold, industrial efficiency. You might be allowed to see them, perhaps for an hour a day, a scheduled appointment to love your own baby, but you would not raise them. They would be a ward of the parish, another anonymous mouth to feed, another soul to be shaped into a life of hard labor. The men are put to work in one wing, breaking rocks or grinding corn. The women are sent to the laundry or the kitchens. Your hands roll from lion scalding water. You would eat in silence, sleep in a cavernous, cold dormitory filled with the coughing and quiet weeping of strangers. Historians still debate the true purpose of these institutions. Were they a flawed, brutal attempt at social safety, a last resort against starvation, or were they cages, deliberately made to be as miserable as possible, a warning to the rest of the populace to keep their affairs in order and their morality intact? To you, sitting in your room, the academic distinction is meaningless. It is a place where mothers and children are separated, where hope goes to be systematically dismantled. It is a living death. You would survive, perhaps, but the person who walked out, if you ever did, would be a hollowed-out stranger. The second path is shorter, and perhaps crueler. It doesn't lead to a gate, but simply out the front door of this boarding house, with your small trunk cast onto the pavement behind you, the path of the streets. At first, you might find charity, a church mission, a bowl of thin soup, but soon, that charity would curdle into suspicion. A young, able-bodied woman with a baby. The questions would start, the judgmental stares, and the nights. You shudder to think of the nights, huddled in a doorway, trying to shield a tiny, fragile body from the biting wind and the endless, soaking rain, trying to find food when you can't even feed yourself. On this path, the shame is public, a spectacle for every passerby, and the bleak, unspeakable truth is that a baby is not built for such a life. It would be a slow, quiet fading, a battle you would lose to the cold, to hunger, to one of the dozen diseases that fester in the city's slums. Then there is the third path, the one that seems the bravest, but is perhaps the most foolish, the path of trying to keep your child, on your own terms, to find a new job, a new room, and pretend to be a widow. It sounds so simple, a small, white lie, but your world is not built for that lie, without references, without a husband, without a family. You are a ghost, who would enter into you, who would hire you, with an infant that needs constant care. You would be hounded, suspected. Every knock on the door would bring a fresh wave of panic. It would be a life of constant, grinding fear, of mere starvation, always one step away from the workhouse or the streets anyway. Some charitable groups run small lying-in hospitals, a very niche and little-known option for women in your state. You've heard whispers of them, places where you can give birth in relative safety, and for a few weeks. You are not a sinner, just a mother, but they are few. Their waiting lists are impossibly long, and their moral scrutiny is an ordeal in itself. They are a fantasy, not a real choice. So you trace these three paths in your mind, again and again: the workhouse, the street, the knife of a hunted liar. Each one ends in the same place: the loss of your child, whether they are taken by the state, by the code, or by your own inability to provide. The result is identical: the little life inside you, the one that is so utterly dependent on you, has no future in this world if you follow the known roads. You push the thoughts away, a physical effort, like shoving a heavy piece of furniture. They are all traps. They are all dead ends. There has to be another door, a hidden one, one that nobody talks about, and as the gaslight outside sputters and coughs, you feel a new, sharp-edged desperation take hold. You will find it. You have to. Days turn into a week, then two. The secret is getting harder to keep. The landlady, Mrs. Table, gives you a long, searching look as you pass on the stairs, her eyes lingering for just a moment too long on your waistline. The girls at the draper's shop have started whispering behind their hands when you turn your back. You find yourself strategically arranging bolts of fabric in front of you at the counter, or feigning a sudden need to bend down and adjust a display. Every moment is a performance, and it is exhausting. Your evenings are spent in your room, locked in your quiet panic. You've stopped eating much, partly from anxiety, partly from a foolish, desperate hope that if you just get thinner, the problem might somehow shrink as well. It doesn't. You lie awake at night, listening to the city's restless heartbeat, the rumble of a late-night omnibus, the distant clang of a ship's bell from the docks, the mournful cry of a cat in the alley below. They all sound like clocks, ticking down the seconds you have left. One evening, you are wrapping up a small parcel of fish for your supper, using a page from yesterday's newspaper that you've scavenged from the common room. Your eyes skim the dense columns of print out of habit. Shopping news, political speeches, reports of petty crime. And then, you see it, tucked away at the bottom of a page, in a section of small, tightly packed advertisements, almost hidden amongst the notices for patent medicines and domestic help wanted. It's no more than a few lines long, the type small and unassuming. Married with no child of their own, at a comfortable home in the country, would like the care of a healthy infant. A good premium required for complete surrender, discretion assured. Write to Mrs. Harding, Post Office Box 12, Bristol. You read it once, then twice. Your heart gives a painful, hopeful leap. A comfortable home in the country, no child of their own. It paints such a picture. You can almost see it. A little stone cottage with roses growing around the door. A smiling, rosy-cheeked woman holding out her arms. A kind-faced man in the background, perhaps leaning on a garden rake. It's a scene from a sentimental novel, a perfect, ready-made dream. The words complete surrender are cold, clinical. They send a small shiver down your spine. But discretion assured. Those two words are a bomb. Discretion is what you need. A clean break. A solution that doesn't involve the workhouse gates or the freezing rain of a London alley. This could be the hidden door. You scan the rest of the column, and you find another, and another. They are all slightly different, but the core message is the same. A WIDOW would adopt a young child. Comfortable living. Terms. A lump sum of 10. CHILDLESSCO wishes to give a good home to an infant. Reasonable premium. ADOPTION. A kind home awaits a little one. No questions asked. It's a whole hidden language. A secret marketplace operating in plain sight. This is the world of the agony columns, as they're sometimes called. That small print universe of personal advertisements where people air their troubles and seek their strange solutions. Historians love these columns, seeing them as an unfiltered window into the private anxieties of the age. They contain coded messages between lovers, desperate pleas from families for missing sons, and this quiet, persistent trade in unwanted children. You tear the small section of newspaper out, your hands trembling slightly. You fold it carefully and tuck it into the pocket of your dress. It feels both dangerous and precious, like a stolen jewel. The idea is terrifying. To give your baby away to a complete stranger, someone you've never met, whose only introduction is a few lines of type. To pay them for the privilege of never seeing your child again. But what is the alternative? The slow, public degradation of the workhouse, the near certain death on the streets. Compared to that, the country cottage, the kind, childless couple. It feels like a salvation, a painful one. Yes, a choice that will carve a piece out of your soul. But a salvation nonetheless, for your child. It's a chance at a real life, a life with a family, a home, a future, a life you know, with a sickening certainty that you cannot provide. For you, it's a chance to survive, to walk back into the world, bruised and scarred, but whole. You could get a new job, start again. No one would ever have to know. A curious, and rather sad, bit of trivia is that these advertisements were entirely legal. There were no laws governing adoption, no official agencies to oversee such arrangement. It was a private matter, a simple transaction between two desperate parties. A mother's despair was another's opportunity, and in that legal void, an entire industry was allowed to flourish in the shadows. You look at the scrap of paper again. Mrs. Harding, it's a good, solid name. It sounds respectable. It sounds kind. That night, for the first time in months, you sleep for a few hours without the familiar dreams of iron gates and cold, endless rain. You have found a path, a fool's path, and you pray, with every fiber of your being, that it leads to a better place. The next day is a blur of nervous energy. You go to work. You measure out lengths of ribbon. You smile politely at customers, but your mind is elsewhere. It's composing a letter. Every spare moment, you are thinking of the right words to use, the perfect turn of phrase that will make this Mrs. Harding choose you, choose your baby. You need to sound desperate, but not common, unfortunate, but respectable. You are crafting a fiction, a persona of the fallen woman who is worthy of a second chance. That evening, you sit at the small, rickety desk in your room with a single sheet of cheap paper and a pen. The ink is watery, the nib scratches. Writing this letter feels like the most important act of your life. It's a plea, a negotiation, and a confession all in one. You dip the pen, and your hand hovers over the page. Dear Madam, you begin. The formality feels absurd, given the raw, terrifying nature of your request. I write to you in response to your advertisement in the Daily Telegraph. I am a young woman who has found herself in a most unfortunate and delicate position. I am of good character and education, but through a moment of weakness, I am now expecting a child. You pause, rereading the words. Good character, moment of weakness. It's the required language. You must present yourself as a victim of circumstance, not a willing sinner. This is a performance, and your child's future depends on it. The father is not in a position to offer assistance. You write, a polite and bloodless euphemism for the fact that he is long gone, perhaps to another city, perhaps with another girl, or perhaps he never knew. The details don't matter. He is a ghost in the story. I have no family to turn to, and my situation is becoming desperate. I love my unborn child dearly, and it is for this reason that I seek a better life for them than I can provide. Your advertisement, speaking of a comfortable home, has given me my first glimmer of hope in many months. You have to mention money. That is the point of the transaction, after all. But how to phrase it? You chew on the end of your pen. You have a little money saved. A few pounds painstakingly gathered from your meager wages, hidden in a loose floorboard under your bed. It's not much. It was supposed to be your escape fund, a way to get a fresh start somewhere else. No, it will be the price of your child's life. Regarding the premium, you write carefully, I have a small sum saved. Would £5 be an acceptable amount? I can assure you the child will be healthy and well clothed upon arrival. £5. It's a fortune to you, nearly half a year's wages. But you've heard whispers that this is the going rate. Some historians argue that the sums involved reveal the true nature of the transaction. It wasn't enough to raise a child for life, but it was just enough to make the child's disappearance profitable for the person taking them. The economics are grimly simple. You end the letter with a final, desperate plea. I pray you will consider my case. I am entirely at your mercy and await your reply with the greatest anxiety. Yours respectfully, a desperate mother. You don't sign your real name. You can't. You seal the envelope, your hands slick with nervous sweat. The address is just a post office box number in a city you've never seen. It feels like posting a letter into a void, a message in a bottle cast into a dark sea. This practice of using pseudonyms and post office boxes was incredibly common. It was part of the architecture of discretion that the entire system was built upon. The mother didn't want to be found, and as you will learn, the farmer certainly didn't want to be easily traced. It created a mutual, and ultimately fatal, anonymity. The next morning, on your way to work, you stop at the post office. The building is grand and imposing, a temple of communication. You feel small and shabby standing in the long queue, the letter clutched in your hand. It feels heavy, as if weighted with the decision it contains. When it's your turn, you slide the envelope and a penny under the brass grill. The clerk, a man with a magnificent mustache and a bored expression, stamps it with a heavy thumb and tosses it into a large canvas sack behind him. And just like that, it's gone, sent out into the world, carrying all your hope and all your fear with it. You walk out into the bustling London street, the noise of the traffic and the crowds washing over you. For a moment, you feel a profound sense of relief, of action taken. You've done something. You've opened the hidden door. But it's followed by a wave of cold dread. You have just offered to sell your child. There is no noble way to dress it up. You have set in motion a chain of events you cannot possibly control. All you can do now is wait, and pray that the person who opens that letter, the faceless Mrs. Harding, is truly the kind, loving woman from the cottage in your dreams. The waiting is a unique form of torment. Every knock on the door of the boarding house makes your heart leap into your throat. Every morning, you watch the postman on his route, your breath held until he passes your door. Days crawl by, the whispers at the shop grow louder, your dresses feel tighter. The secret is becoming a physical, undeniable presence, and your carefully constructed world is shrinking with each passing day. You begin to lose hope. Perhaps your letter was lost. Perhaps your offer of £5 was too low, an insult. Perhaps Mrs. Harding found another, more suitable baby. Then, one grey and drizzly afternoon, it arrives. A letter, slipped under your door. The envelope is clean, the handwriting on the front elegant and precise. It is addressed simply to a desperate mother. See your address. Your hands are shaking so badly you can barely break the wax seal. You unfold the single sheet of paper inside. My dear young woman, it begins. The tone is warm, reassuring, almost maternal. Thank you for your most moving letter. My heart went out to you as I read of your plight. Please do not despair. You have reached out to a friend. My husband and I have long yearned for a little one to brighten our home, and we would be honored to provide a life of love and comfort for your child. You have to sit down on the edge of your bed, the letter trembling in your hand. The relief is so intense it feels like a physical blow. A friend, she called you a friend. Your offer of £5 is perfectly acceptable. The letter continues. We are not doing this for financial gain, but out of a Christian desire to help both a child in need and a mother in distress. The money will simply help to cover the initial expenses of clothing and a proper cot. We ask for nothing more. Our reward will be the sound of a child's laughter in our quiet house. This is a masterstroke of the trade. The most successful baby farmers, the ones who operated for years, knew exactly how to sound. They didn't talk like business people. They used the language of charity, of Christian duty, of maternal love. They were selling a fantasy, and they knew their customers desperately wanted to believe it. Historians who have studied these letters are often struck by their psychological cunning. They anticipate the mother's guilt and wash it away with words of kindness and reassurance. The letter goes on to lay out the practicalities. I understand the need for the utmost discretion. I will be traveling to London on business in 2 weeks' time. Might I suggest we meet at Paddington Station? It is always so busy. We shall not be noticed. Let us say, next to the main ticket office, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, on Tuesday the 14th. Paddington Station. It's a perfect choice. A place of comings and goings, of anonymous crowds, where a brief, tearful exchange between two women would be swallowed up by the general chaos. You will know me, the letter says, as I will be wearing a dark green traveling cloak and carrying a copy of the Pilgrim's Progress. This little detail is another touch of genius. What could be more respectable, more reassuringly pious, than a woman carrying a classic of religious literature? The letter is signed, Your sincere friend, Mrs. Thomas. Wait, Thomas, you frown, picking up your scrap of newspaper. The advertisement said Mrs. Harding. You feel a tiny, cold flicker of unease. Why the different name? But you push the thought away almost as soon as it appears. It must be for discretion. Of course, she is protecting her privacy, just as you are protecting yours. It makes perfect sense. She is a respectable woman. She cannot have her name connected with such a delicate, semi-public transaction. It's a sign of her good sense. You tell yourself. It's a sign that she understands the rules of this secret world. One of the strangest and most debated aspects of these cases is how many mothers seemingly ignored these small red flags. The change of name, the vagueness of the address. Academics argue whether the mothers were simply too desperate to notice, or if they were engaging in a form of willful blindness, subconsciously choosing not to see the cracks in the facade because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. You read the letter one more time, letting the warm, comforting words soothe your frayed nerves. Your sincere friend. You are not alone in this anymore. You have an ally, a kind benefactor, Mrs. Thomas. The name already feels familiar. So, you imagine her, a woman in a dark green cloak, a gentle, understanding smile on her face. She is your rescuer. She is your child's future. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prepare yourself, to prepare the baby's things, and to get ready for the hardest, most necessary goodbye of your life. The flicker of unease is gone, replaced by a firm, resolute calm. You have made the right decision. You are sure of it. The next 2 weeks are a strange and contradictory time. There is the quiet, constant terror of your secret, but now it is overlaid with a sense of purpose, a plan. You work your hours at the shop. You endure the knowing glances and the half-whispered comments, but they have less power over you now. You have a way out. An escape route is planned. Your evenings are spent in quiet preparation. You use what little money you have left to buy a few small things for the baby. A soft flannel receiving blanket, a tiny woolen bonnet, a long white christening gown. You buy the best you can afford, wanting your child to arrive at their new home looking cared for, loved. Each stitch you sew into a hem, each ribbon you tie, is both an act of love and an act of letting go. This is the trousseau for a journey you will not share. You pack it all into a small wicker basket, alongside the clothes. You place a small, silver locket. It was your mother's. Inside, you tuck a tiny curl of your own hair. It's a foolishly sentimental gesture. You know that the child will likely never know its significance. But you can't it. It's a desperate, silent need to send a piece of yourself with them. A tangible link to a past they will never know. The day arrives, Tuesday the 14th. It is a typically grey London day, the sky the colour of a dirty pearl. You have told your landlady you are visiting a sick aunt in the country and will be gone for a few days. It is a flimsy excuse, but she accepts it without question, perhaps relieved to have you out of the house. The child has been born, a small, perfect, healthy baby. Your baby. The birth was a secret, terrifying ordeal, managed alone in your small room in the dead of night. No, you wrap the sleeping infant tightly in the new blanket, their small face serene and unknowing. You look at them, really look at them. trying to memorize every detail. The sweep of their eyelashes on their cheek, the tiny, perfect curve of their ear. This is the first and last time you will have this quiet moment. A wave of love so fierce it feels like grief washes over you. You have to do this. Fulton. You dress in your plainest, most unremarkable clothes. You are trying to be invisible. You place the £5, carefully counted, into an envelope. The wicker basket in one hand, the bundled infant held tight in your arms. You slip out of the boarding house and into the teeming city. The journey to Paddington Station is a nightmare. The omnibus is crowded and noisy. The smell of wet wool and unwashed bodies thicken the air. Every jolt of the carriage makes you flinch, tightening your grip on the baby. You feel as if every eye is on you, that your secret is written in glowing letters on your forehead, but no one pays you any mind. You are just another face in the anonymous London crowd. Paddington Station is even worse. It's a cathedral of noise and steam. The vast iron and glass roof arches high above, trapping the smoke from a dozen locomotives. The air shrieks with whistles, groans with the sound of grinding steel, and hums with the roar of thousands of overlapping conversations. Porters rush past with mountains of luggage. Families say their loud, tearful goodbyes. Men in top hats read newspapers while they wait for their trains. You find the main ticket office, your heart hammering against your ribs. It's exactly as Mrs. Thomas said, a perfect place to hide in plain sight. You clutch your baby closer. The smell of coal smoke is sharp in your nostrils. You check the station clock. It's 5 minutes to 3. This very scenario, the train station handover, was a common feature of the baby farming trade. They were liminal spaces, places of transition, where people from different worlds could meet briefly and then disappear back into their own lives. Historians often point to the rise of the railway network as a key facilitator of this grim business, allowing for a level of anonymity and mobility that would have been impossible a generation earlier. You skin the crowd, your eyes searching for a dark green cloak. The minutes stretch into an eternity. What if she doesn't come? What if it was all a cruel trick? And then, you see her. A woman is walking towards the ticket office. She is of middle age, with a plain, unremarkable face. She is wearing a dark green traveling cloak, and tucked under her arm is a book. You can just make out the title on the spine, The Pilgrim's Progress. It is her, Mrs. Thomas. She looks normal. She looks respectable. She looks, in a strange way, exactly like you hoped she would. She has a calm, reassuring air about her. She has not seen you yet. She is your savior, and as she turns her head, her eyes beginning to scan the crowd, you take a deep, shuddering breath and prepare to take the final, irreversible step. You take a tentative step forward, catching her eye. For a moment, her expression is blank, the polite, indifferent face of a stranger in a crowd. Then, a flicker of recognition, and her features soften into a warm, gentle smile. It's a smile that seems to instantly understand everything. Your fear, your shame, your desperate hope. It crinkles the corners of her eyes. She walks toward you, her movements calm and unhurried. You must be the dear girl from the letter, she says, her voice slow and soothing, easily lost in the station's din. It's a kind voice, a motherly voice. I am Mrs. Thomas. I am so glad you came. You could only nod, your throat suddenly tight. Words feel impossible. You are clutching the baby so tightly your knuckles are white. Mrs. Thomas' gaze drops to the bundle in your arms. Her smile deepens. "Oh my," she whispers, her voice filled with what sounds like genuine awe and tenderness. "Oh, what a perfect little angel. Just perfect." She doesn't reach for the baby. Not yet. She is patient. She seems to understand the gravity of this moment for you. Instead, she gestures towards a slightly quieter corner, near a pillar, away from the main crush of people. "Let us step over here for a moment. My dear, we mustn't rush." You follow her, grateful to be out of the main thoroughfare. She puts a hand gently on your arm. Her touch is firm and reassuring. You have been so brave, she says. So very brave. You are doing the right thing. You are giving this little one the gift of a good life. Every word is a balm to your raw, guilty conscience. She is giving you the absolution you so desperately need to hear. This is the core of the transaction. And it has nothing to do with money. You are buying forgiveness. You are buying the belief that you are a good mother, making a noble sacrifice. Is it a boy or a girl? She asks, her eyes still on the baby. Hey girl, you manage to whisper. Hey little girl. Mrs. Thomas repeats, a dreamy quality in her voice. I have always wanted a daughter. We will name her Rose. We have a little room all ready for her, with yellow curtains and a white cot. My husband has already carved a little wooden bird to hang above it. The details are so specific, so perfect. The yellow curtains, the wooden bird. You can see it all in your mind's eye. A sun-drenched nursery in a country cottage. It's the image you have been clinging to for weeks, and here she is, painting it for you in vivid color. A curious and heart-wrenching fact is that investigators in later cases would find that these baby farmers often used the same handful of stories, the same fictional details, over and over again with different mothers. The yellow curtains and the wooden bird were props in a well-rehearsed play. Now is the time. You fumble in your pocket and produce the envelope with the £5. Her hand closes over it smoothly, and it disappears into a deep pocket in her cloak without a glance. The money is a distasteful necessity, her manner seems to imply, a formality to be dispensed with quickly so you can get to the more important matters of the heart. And the basket, she asks, nodding to the wicker carrier in your other hand. Her things. You say, a few clothes, and this. You show her the little silver locket. It was my mother's. Please, make sure she has it when she's old enough. Of course, my dear, Mrs. Thomas says, her expression one of deep solemnity. I will keep it for her, I promise. She takes the basket. And now there is nothing left to do. This is the moment. The air feels thick, heavy. The roar of the station seems to fade into a distant hum. It is just you, this kind-looking woman, and the sleeping child in your arms. Mrs. Thomas opens her arms. It is time, dear, she says, her voice impossibly gentle. Let me take her now. She will be safe with me. Your own arms feel like lead. They don't want to move. They don't want to let go. You press your face into the soft blanket for one last moment, breathing in the sweet, milky scent of your own child. You kiss her forehead, a tear splashing onto her cheek. She doesn't stir. Then, slowly, mechanically, you transfer them all, heavy bundle from your arms to hers, for a single, terrifying second. Your hands and hers are both holding the baby, a human bridge between two lives. And then you let go. The sense of emptiness is immediate and absolute. Your arms feel cold, pointless, Mrs. Thomas cradles the baby with an expert, practiced stare. She looks down at the tiny face, and smiles that warm, reassuring smile again. Go now, my dear, she says softly, looking up at you. Don't look back. Go and start your new life. And do not worry, ever. I will love her as if she were my own. I promise. You do as she says. You turn away. It's the hardest physical act you've ever performed. Every instinct in your body is screaming at you to turn back, to snatch your child from this stranger's arms, to run. But you force one foot in front of the other, moving away from the pillar, melting back into the anonymous, swirling crowd. You don't look back. You can't. If you look back, you will break. You find a bench at the far end of the platform, partially hidden by a pile of luggage. You sink onto it, your legs suddenly unable to support you. From here, You can see the main concourse, a distorted, blurry sea of people through your tear-filled eyes. You watch as Mrs. Thomas, your baby held securely in her arms, walks calmly towards the departures board. She checks the timetable, then moves towards a platform where a train is hissing steam, preparing to leave. A sign above the platform reads, Bristol in the West Country. The country. It's real. The country home. The childless couple. It's all real. You watch her board the train, disappearing into one of the third-class carriages. You feel a strange, hollow sense of relief. The transaction is complete. You have done it. You have saved your child. You have saved yourself. Now, let's shift our perspective. Let's leave you on that cold, hard bench for a moment, and let's follow Mrs. Thomas. Imagine you are an invisible observer, able to follow her onto that train. She finds a seat in a crowded, noisy carriage. The air is thick with the smell of wet coats and orange peels. A baby in the seat opposite begins to cry, and Mrs. Thomas gives the mother a brief, sympathetic smile. She adjusts the bundle in her own arms, rocking it gently. She is the very picture of maternal care. She is just another woman, traveling with her baby. No one gives her a second glance. The train gives a great lurch, and with a groan of metal and a blast from its whistle, it begins to pull slowly out of the station. Paddington's grand glass roof recedes, replaced by the grimy brickwork of the London suburbs. The houses grow poorer, more tightly packed. Chimney pots blur into a forest of clay. The baby in her arms begins to stir, a small, unhappy noise bubbling from its throat. Mrs. Thomas looks down. Then now, as the train picks up speed, now that the eyes of the desperate mother are no longer upon her, you see the first tiny crack in the facade. The warm, gentle smile is gone. Her face is a blank, professional mask. The baby's cry grows a little louder, a little more insistent. Mrs. Thomas doesn't coo or soothe. She juggles the baby. Her short, impatient movement, twice. The crying continues. From the deep pocket of her cloak, she produces a small, dark blue bottle. It has no label. She uncorks it, and a sweet, cloying, vaguely medicinal smell fills the air for a moment. This is Godfrey's cordial, the infamous mother's friend. It's a cheap, readily available patent medicine, sold over the counter in any chemist's shop. Its primary ingredients are opium and treacle. It's a powerful sedative, and in the hands of the unscrupulous, a poison. A small dose will quiet a fussy baby for hours. A slightly larger dose will quiet it forever. Some historians have a grim fascination with these Victorian patent medicines, seeing them as a stark example of the era's medical ignorance and lack of regulation. Godfrey's cordial, along with dozens of similar products, was responsible for the deaths of countless infants, both accidental and intentional. It was, quite simply, the cheapest and quietest poison available. Mrs. Thomas looks around the carriage. No one is watching. She dips her little finger into the bottle, then forces it into the baby's mouth, rubbing the thick, sweet liquid onto its gums. The baby splutters, its cries turning into a weak, confused whimper. And then, within a minute, silence. The baby's eyes roll back slightly, and it sinks into a deep, unnatural stupor. Mrs. Thomas places the now silent bundle on the seat beside her. She pulls the blanket up, covering most of the baby's face. To anyone else in the carriage, it looks like a sleeping child, peacefully at rest. She then reaches for the wicker basket. She opens it and removes the carefully folded clothes, examining them with a critical, appraising eye. The christening gown is good quality. It will fetch a few shillings. The blankets, too. She finds the small silver locket. She weighs it in her palm for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she slips it into her pocket. Not the pocket with the money, a different one. The train rattles on, leaving London far behind. But it is not heading towards a country cottage with roses around the door. The ticket in Mrs. Thomas' pocket is not for a quaint village in the heart of the countryside. It's for a stop just an hour down the line. A bustling, industrial town on the river. Homework, for today, is almost done. The reassuring promises, the shared tears. The entire performance at the station was a lie, a cold, practiced, and profitable lie. The train slows, its brakes squealing, as it pulls into a station far sooner than you would have expected. This is not the rolling green countryside of your imagination. This is radiant, very busy, workaday town of brick factories and breweries. The air thick with the smell of hops and coal. The platform is crowded with laborers and factory girls. Mrs. Thomas gets off the train, the other bundle in one arm, the wicker basket in the other. She moves with a brisk, purposeful stride, a woman who knows exactly where she is going. She doesn't head for a carriage stand or seek out a cab. She walks. She navigates the busy streets, turning down a succession of smaller, shabby avenues. The grand Victorian facades of the town centre give way to rows of identical, two-story brick houses, their front steps scrubbing the pavement. This is a neighbourhood of clerks, skilled labourers, and families living right on the edge of respectability. It is aggressively, relentlessly ordinary. She stops in front of one of the houses. It is indistinguishable from its neighbours, save for a few pots of wilting geraniums on the windowsill. There is no garden with roses. There is no kindly husband leaning on a rake. There is just a dark painted front door with a tarnished brass knocker. She fishes a key from her pocket and lets herself in. The moment the door closes behind her, the last vestiges of her performance fall away. This is not a home, it's a workplace. The air inside is stale and stuffy, with an underlying sour, medicinal smell. The front parlour, which should be the heart of the family home, is sparsely furnished. A threadbare rug, a couple of hard-backed chairs, a small table. There are no family portraits on the walls, no knick-knacks on the mantelpiece. It is a room with no love in it. She places the wicker basket on the table and lays the drugged baby on the faded, dusty cushions of a horsehair sofa. The baby does not stir. It is just a bundle, an object, an item of inventory. From the back room, you can hear a thin, reedy wailing. Not a healthy cry, but a weak, exhausted whimper. Mrs. Thomas sighs, an expression of weary annoyance crossing her face. She walks through to the small kitchen at the back of the house. Here, the pretense of a comfortable home utterly collapses. The room is grim. A bare wooden table, a single cold water tap over a stone sink, a small, black-lidded stove, and in one corner, on a thin, soiled mattress on the floor, are two more babies. They are skeletal, their skin pale and waxy, their eyes large and vacant in their tiny, pinched faces. One is the source of the whimpering. The other is England still. They are being systematically starved to death. This was the dark reality of the boarding aspect of baby farming. While some infants were disposed of quickly, others were kept for a time. Why? Historians offer several grimly practical reasons. A farmer might be juggling multiple clients and needed to stagger the disposals. Sometimes they would continue to extract money from the mother, sending letters claiming the child was well but needed extra funds for a special medicine or better food. Keeping the babies alive, just barely, was part of the business model. Mrs. Thomas ignores the whimpering child. She fills a kettle and puts it on the stove. She is businesslike, efficient. She goes back to the parlor and begins to process the day's acquisition. She empties the wicker basket, sorting the clothes into a pile. They will be sold. She examines the locket again. More closely this time. It is real silver. Another small profit. She looks at the baby on the sofa. This one is healthy, plump. It would take weeks to starve it. That is inefficient. It is also risky. A starving baby cries. And crying attracts the attention of neighbors. This one requires a different, more immediate solution. This is the cold calculus of her trade. She is not a monster in the theatrical sense. She is not driven by a frenzy of rage or a lust for cruelty. She is a businesswoman. The babies are her raw materials. The mother's desperation is her market. The £5 is her revenue. And the child's life is an inconvenient byproduct to be disposed of as cheaply and quietly as possible. The historical term for these women was angel makers, a chillingly euphemistic phrase that captures the saccharine lies they told and the dark reality of what they did. They were not providing a path to heaven for the babies, but a path to a quiet profit for themselves. She leaves the new baby on the sofa, still deep in its opium-laced sleep, and tends to the fire. Her movements are methodical, unhurried. The house is quiet now, save for the ticking of a clock and the faint, fading whimpers on the back room. The sun is beginning to set, and the light in the grim little parlor is growing dim. Outside, the world goes on. People are returning from work, greeting their families, sitting down to dinner. But inside this ordinary brick house, behind a respectable front door, a quiet, methodical evil is preparing for a long night's work. Let's talk about the money. £5. It's heavy in Mrs. Thomas' pocket. To you, it was a fortune. The painful sacrifice of half a year's savings. To her, it is the standard fee, the cornerstone of her entire business model. Let's break down the chilling economics of her raid. First, you must understand the value of £5 in the late Victorian era. For a skilled labourer or a clerk, it might represent a month's wages. For a domestic servant, like you, it was vastly more. It was a sum just large enough to be a devastating sacrifice for the mother, but just small enough to be tempting for someone with no conscience. It was the perfect price point for misery. Now consider her expenses. There is the cost of the advertisement in the newspaper, which might be a few shillings. There is the train ticket, perhaps another few shillings. The button of Godfrey's cordial, pennies. The house rent is her largest overhead, but that is a fixed cost, spread across her many transactions, so from a single £5 payment, her initial profit is substantial, almost the entire amount. But the truly insidious part of the business was the upsell. Many baby farmers didn't just take the lump sum. They would write back to the mother a few weeks later. The letter would be full of cheerful news. Little Rose is doing so well. She has the most beautiful smile and is beloved by all the village. Then would come the catch. The doctor did say, however, that she is a delicate child and requires a special tonic to build up her strength. It is quite expensive, but I know you would want her to have the very best. Could you possibly spare another 10 shillings? For a mother racked with guilt, desperate to believe she has done the right thing, such a letter was almost impossible to resist. She would scrape the money together and send it, grateful for the news, happy to contribute to her child's well-being. The baby, of course, was likely already gone. The special tonic was pure fiction. This correspondence could continue for months, a steady stream of small payments extracted through emotional manipulation, until the mother either ran out of money or her guilt began to fade. Then there was the profit from the baby's belongings, the layette. The little bundle of clothes and blankets you so lovingly prepared was a key part of the transaction. A good quality christening gown could be sold to a local pawnbroker for a decent sum. The same went for any small piece of jewelry. Like your mother's locket. These were stripped and sold immediately. It's a grim detail, but historians have found records from pawn shops that align with the timelines of these crimes, showing a steady trickle of infant clothes and cheap jewelry being sold by the same few women. The most macabre business model, however, was one that combined baby farming with insurance fraud. This was a particularly cold-blooded variation. A farmer would legally adopt an infant, often for a smaller fee. Then, she would take out a life insurance policy on the child. These policies were cheap and required no medical examination. The payout upon death might be £1 or £2. After a suitable waiting period, the child would die of natural causes. Convulsions, wasting disease, teething, all common and rarely questioned causes of infant mortality at the time. The farmer would collect the insurance money for a truly industrious killer. This was a way to get paid twice for a single child. It's a point of serious academic debate how widespread this insurance fraud model was. Some scholars argue it was a primary motivator for a core group of killers, while others believe it was a more opportunistic, secondary income stream. The truth is likely somewhere in between. What is certain is that it turned a child's life into a cool financial calculation with a predictable, fatal outcome. So when you look at the £5 you handed over, you see it's not just a single payment. It's the key that unlocks a whole portfolio of potential profits. The lump sum, the potential for extortion through follow-up matters, the resale value of the clothing, and, in some cases, the insurance payout. Back in the grim little house in Reading, Mrs. Thomas counts the money from your envelope. She adds it to a small tin box she keeps hidden under a loose floorboard, the same hiding place used for your savings. The box is heavy with coins and a few folded banknotes. It is a box full of last goodbyes and false promises. It is the ledger of her business. Each coin represents a child that was, and is no more. She is not just a killer. She is an entrepreneur. And this is the bottom line of her dark, quiet, and appallingly successful enterprise. Night has fallen over the town of Reading. The gas lamps cast long, dancing shadows on the street outside. Inside the house, Mrs. Thomas has lit a single, foul-smelling tallow candle, which throws a weak, flickering light around the parlor. The new baby, your baby, is still lying on the sofa, lost in its drugged sleep. It hasn't moved for hours. Now Mrs. Thomas begins the final, most practical part of her work. Her movements are unhurried, methodical. She is a craftswoman, and this is her craft. She goes to a small cupboard in the corner of the room and takes out her tools. They are horrificously simple, mundane items that could be found in any home. First, a roll of cheap, white ribbon or tape. It looks like something you would use to tie up a parcel or trim a bonnet. In your shop, you sold ribbon just like it by the yard. She cuts the length of it, about 1.5 feet long. She tests its strength, pulling it taut between her hands. It is surprisingly strong. This simple item, this dressmaker's tape, was the most common weapon of the angel makers. It was silent, bloodless, and easily obtainable. It left few marks, and in an era of rudimentary forensic science, the subtle signs of strangulation on a tiny infant neck were almost certain to be overlooked by a parish doctor performing a cursory examination. He would jot down convulsions or failure to thrive on the death certificate, and no one would ask any questions. Next, from the same cupboard, she takes out a small, heavy object wrapped in cloth. It's a flatron, the kind used for pressing clothes, or perhaps a couple of old, heavy sash weights from a window frame. Anything with enough weight to counteract the natural buoyancy of a small body. She takes the baby from the sofa. The infant is limp, a dead weight in her arms. She lays it on the threadbare rug. The baby gives a soft, almost inaudible sigh in its sleep. A tiny, unconscious protest. Mrs. Thomas pays it no mind. She works quickly now, her movements practiced and efficient. She takes the length of white tape. She wraps it once, then twice, around the baby's neck. She ties a firm, tight knot. There is no struggle, no cry, just a brief, silent, final tension. And then, it is done. The small body is still. The house is completely quiet. The only sound is the frantic, silent beating of your own imaginary heart as you watch this scene unfold. She then takes a piece of brown paper and some string, the kind a butcher would use. She wraps the body, along with the heavy object, into a neat, tight parcel. It is anonymous and remarkable. It could be anything. A leg of lamb from the market, a bundle of old clothes. This is the grim reality that the sentimental stories of the country cottage were designed to hide. There was no cruelty in the theatrical sense, no shouting or violence. It was a quiet, domestic, methodical act. A problem being solved. A piece of business being concluded. And what of the other babies in the back room? The ones being slowly starved. That was another tool of the trade. A different method for a different circumstance. Starvation, often accelerated by neglect and exposure, was a way to mimic natural causes. These babies would eventually succumb to what would be diagnosed as marasmus, a severe form of malnutrition. It was a slow, agonizing process, but it created a death certificate that raised no suspicion. The use of Godfrey as cordial was the third pillar of this horrific methodology. Many baby farmers were not active, hands-on killers in the way Mrs. Thomas is tonight. They were killers by neglect. They would simply keep the infants permanently sedated with opium, quieting their cries for food and comfort. A drugged baby doesn't fuss. It doesn't demand attention. Over days and weeks, the combination of starvation and constant sedation would lead the infant to quietly waste away. Academics still debate the precise line between intentional murder and fatal neglect in these cases. For the infant, of course, the distinction was meaningless. Mrs. Thomas looks at the neat brown paper parcel on her floor. She looks at the clock. It is late now. The street outside will be quiet. She puts on her dark green cloak again. The same cloak of respectability she wore to meet you at the station. She picks up the parcel. It is surprisingly heavy. She opens the front door, peers out into the darkness, and seeing the coast is clear, she slips out into the night. She walks through the sleeping town, her footsteps echoing softly on the cobblestones. The route is familiar to her. She avoids the main thoroughfares, sticking to the narrow back alleys and unlit lanes that run like a secret network behind the respectable face of the town. The parcel, held tightly under her arm, is a dense, awkward weight. Her destination is the river. In this town, like in so many British towns and cities, the river is the great artery, the source of commerce, and the convenient, ever-moving repository for all the things the town wishes to forget. Industrial waste, sewage, the occasional dead animal. The river accepts it all, pulling it downstream, cleansing the town of its refuse. It is the perfect accomplice. It is deep, it is dark, and it never tells a soul. She reaches the two-path, a muddy track running alongside the black, swirling water. The air here is damp and smells of wet earth and decay. A thin mist hangs over the river's surface, muffling the sounds of the night. Across the water, the lights of a few riverside pubs cast long, shimmering reflections. But on this side, it is dark and deserted. She stops at a place where the bank is steep, and an old willow tree dips its branches into the current. This is her spot. She has been here before. Many times. She glances around one last time. There is no one. The town is asleep, its secrets safely tucked behind closed doors. With a small grunted effort, she heaves the parcel. It sails through the air in a short, clumsy arc and lands in the water with a surprisingly loud splash. For a moment, it bobs on the surface, a pale, rectangular shape in the darkness. But the weight inside does its work. The parcel tips, waterlogs, and then, with a few final bubbles, it sinks beneath the black water and is gone. The river flows on, its surface knitting back together, leaving no trace of the interruption. Within minutes, the current will have carried the parcel downstream, rolling it along the muddy riverbed, covering it with silt, lodging it against a snag of old branches or a pile of discarded bricks. It is lost. It is erased. You are standing there in the dark, an invisible witness to the obliteration of a life. The child you held, the child whose face you tried to memorize, the child for whom you sacrificed everything, is now a piece of weighted refuse at the bottom of a cold, dark river. The country cottage, the yellow curtains, the loving couple. It all dissolves into this one. Brutal, final image, a splash, a few bubbles, and then nothing. The River Thames and its tributaries. like the Kennet which runs through reading, were the final characters in so many of these stories. They were the mass, unmarked graves of the baby farming era. For decades, the bodies of infants would be discovered by bargemen, by lockkeepers, by children playing on the banks. They were found snagged in fishing nets, washed up on muddy shores after a flood, or discovered during the dredging of a canal. Most were dismissed. The official explanation was usually stillbirth. An unmarried mother, it was assumed, had given birth in secret and, in a panic, had disposed of the body. It was a tragedy, a sin, but not necessarily a murder. The sheer number of these discoveries, however, began to form a disturbing, undeniable pattern. One or two could be explained away, but dozens, scores. A few police constables and coroners began to suspect that something more systematic, more organized, was at work. It's a point of historical debate just how many victims there were. By its very nature, this was a crime that erased its own evidence. The killers were meticulous about anonymity, and their chosen method of disposal was brutally effective. Estimates range from the dozens to the many hundreds. Some historians argue that for every baby farmer who was caught, there were likely several more who lived out their lives and died in their beds. Their crimes literally washed away by the forgiving waters of the river. Mrs. Thomas stands for a moment on the riverbank, looking at the spot where the parcel disappeared. Her face is impassive. There is no sign of remorse, no flicker of fear. This is simply the final step in a business transaction. She has delivered the goods. She turns her back on the river and begins to walk home. Her cloak pulled tight against the night's chill. Her pockets are a little heavier with money in a silver locket. Her arms are a little lighter. The balance sheet of her life has been squared away for another night. As Mrs. Thomas makes her way back through the sleeping streets, it's important to understand that she is not an isolated monster, a singular anomaly in an otherwise decent world. To think of her that way is to miss the true systemic horror of the situation. She is a franchisee in a dark and thriving national industry. You didn't just stumble upon one bad apple. You tapped into a vast, underground network of them. From the slums of Glasgow to the docks of Liverpool. From the factory towns of Manchester to the quiet suburbs of London, women just like Mrs. Thomas were placing almost identical advertisements and carrying out almost identical acts. They were a sisterhood of quiet, methodical killers, bound by a shared business model and a common clientele of desperate young women. How did this network function? It was a formal organization, of course. There were no secret meetings or coded handshakes. It was a decentralized, almost organic, system that grew to fill a desperate social need. It operated through word of mouth, through the agony columns of newspapers, and through the quiet complicity of a society that desperately wanted this problem to simply disappear. At the lowest level, you had the nurses. These were often local women, perhaps a laundress or a seamstress, who would take in a single baby for a small weekly fee. They weren't necessarily malicious, just pure and overwhelmed, but with 10 other mouths to feed and no understanding of infant hygiene or nutrition. The baby in their care often stood little chance. They would die of neglect, a death of 1,000 tiny cuts, rather than by a single, violent act. This was death by apathy, and it was tragically common. A step above them were the opportunists, women who might take in 2 or 3 babies at a time. They would overcrowd them in a single room, feed them on a dangerously cheap diet of bread soaked in water and sugar, a concoction known as pep, and keep them quiet with generous, regular doses of Godfrey's cordial. Their goal wasn't necessarily to kill the children, but to spend as little of the boarding money as possible on their care, thus maximizing their profit. The deaths, which were frequent and inevitable, were a predictable, if not directly intended, outcome of the business model. And then you had the apex predators, the professionals, the women like Mrs. Thomas. These were the true angel makers, the serial killers who had refined the process into a cold, efficient system. They understood the importance of advertising. of creating a reassuring persona, of using the railway system for anonymity, and of efficient, traceless disposal. Some, the most audacious, even developed specialties. One woman might be known for her skill in faking death certificates. Another might have a contact at a local cemetery who would, for a small fee, lose the paperwork for an infant burial. There's a fascinating and grim debate among historians about the social backgrounds of these women. They weren't cackling hags from a fairy tale. Many, like the infamous Amelia Dyer, who is likely the basis for our Mrs. Thomas, were trained nurses. They had a veneer of medical knowledge and a badge of respectability that made their lies all the more believable. Others were midwives, or the widows of respectable tradesmen. They were mothers and grandmothers themselves. They understood the language of domesticity and used it as a perfect camouflage for their horrific work. They were, terrifyingly, ordinary. This network was also enabled by a web of peripheral players, the chemists who sold the opiates, no questions asked, the pawnbrokers who bought a steady supply of baby clothes, the newspaper editors who, for a fee, printed the cryptic advertisements, and even, in a strange way, the mothers themselves. It was a secret passed between girls in the factory, whispered from one domestic servant to another. If you find yourself in trouble, the advice would go, look in the paper. There are people who can help. You thought you were the only one, sitting alone in your room with your terrible secret. But you were one of thousands, all reading the same advertisements, all writing the same desperate letters, all feeding into the same monstrous machine. So was Mrs. Thomas slips the key into her door, returning to her quiet, respectable-looking house. Remember this. The darkness is not contained within those four walls. It stretches out along the railway lines. It is woven into the pages of the daily newspaper. It whispers in the desperate conversations of frightened women across the entire country. You didn't find a monster. You found an industry. Back inside the house, Mrs. Thomas lights a lamp. Its steady glow a welcome change from the flickering candlelight. The house is silent. The whimpering from the back room has stopped. She moves to the small desk in the corner of the parlor. From a locked drawer, she removes a simple wooden box. It is not the tin box of money. This one is for correspondence. She opens it. Inside, there are dozens of letters, neatly bundled with string. At the very top is your letter, the one you wrote with a trembling hand, the one that felt like the most important document of your life. Dear Madame, I am a young woman who has found herself in a most unfortunate and delicate position. She glances at it, her expression unreadable, before placing it with a small pile of others on the desk. This pile is the active file. She then empties one of the bundles from inside the box. It contains perhaps 20 or 30 letters, all written in different hands, on different qualities of paper. Some are written in the elegant, slanted script of a well-educated woman. Others are in the clumsy, barely literate scorn of a factory girl. But they all tell the same story. A story of shame, fear, and a desperate, clutching hope for a secret solution. My shame is more than I can bear. One begins. He promised he would marry me, but he has gone to sea, says another. I am an orphan myself and have nowhere in this world to turn, pleads a third. Reading them, you would feel a strained, gut-wrenching sense of kinship. You are not alone. Your pain, which felt so unique and so isolating, is here, echoed in a chorus of anonymous voices, each letter as a ghost, a whisper of a life that was irrevocably altered, a mother who walked away from a train station with empty arms and a hollowed heart. This box of letters is one of the most powerful tools in her arsenal. Should a mother become troublesome, perhaps threatening to go to the police or demanding to see her child, Mrs. Thomas has a devastating weapon in reserve. She has the mother's own words, in her own handwriting, confessing her shame and initiating the complete surrender of her child. In a Victorian court, a letter like that would destroy a woman's character completely. It was blackmail material of the highest order. The mothers were wrapped not just by their secret, but by the very evidence of their attempt to solve it. Historians who have studied the surviving evidence from baby farming trials are often struck by these letter caches. They provide a chilling, unfiltered look into the minds of both the victims and the perpetrators. For the police, these boxes were a goldmine, a ready-made list of potential witnesses and further victims. For the baby farmers, they were a combination of business records, trophies, and insurance policies against exposure. Mrs. Thomas picks up a fresh sheet of paper and dips her pen in the ink. She is a meticulous businesswoman, and there is correspondence to attend to. She begins to write a new letter, her handwriting the same elegant, reassuring script that so comforted you. My dearest Mary, she writes. The name is taken from a letter in the active pile. I have such wonderful news to share. Your darling little Alfred has settled in so well. He has the chubby's tea cheeks and a laugh that would melt a heart of stone. He is the joy of our little home. My husband is utterly besotted and carries him around the garden every morning. The lines flow from her pen, effortless and smooth. She is a novelist, creating a world of pastoral bliss for her audience of one. I write to you today on a small, practical matter. The winter is drawing in, and our country cottage can be quite draughty. I feel he would benefit greatly from a new set of woolen vests and blankets to ensure he stays warm. I know things must be tight for you, but if you could spare 12 shillings, I would be so very grateful. And I know little Alfred would be, too. She signs it, your ever sincere friend, Mrs. Thomas, and sets it aside to dry. Little Alfred, of course, has been gone for weeks, but his ghost will continue to generate a small, steady income for months to come. She will write more letters just like it tonight, to 2 other mothers, each with a different set of carefully crafted, heartwarming lies and a request for a few more shillings. She then takes out your letter again. She rereads it. She notes your offer of £5. Your mention of the baby's good health. The general tone of desperation. She makes a small pencil mark on the corner. It is a mark of classification. You are filed away. Another transaction completed. Another ghost in the box. Your story, your desperate plea, has been reduced to a piece of paper, an entry in a dark and silent ledger. Weeks, and then months, drift by, for you. Life has settled into a strange, hollow routine. You went back to your job at the draper's shop. You moved to a new boarding house on the other side of the city. No one here knows your secret. On the surface, you have succeeded. You have erased your past. You have survived. But every time you see a mother with a baby on the street, every time you hear a child's laughter from an open window, a cold, sharp pain lances through you. You tell yourself, over and over, that your daughter is happy. You picture her in a sunlit nursery with yellow curtains, a kind woman smiling down at her. You cling to that image. It is the only thing that keeps the guilt from swallowing you whole. Now we must leave you with your quiet grief, and shift our focus once more. We travel back to the town of Reading, but not to the small, brick house. Instead, we go to the local police station. It's a drab, functional building, smelling of stale pipe smoke, damp wool, and carbolic soap. Our attention falls on a man sitting at a large oak desk, poring over a stack of paperwork under the weak glow of a gas lamp. This is a police constable. Let's call him Miller. HES, a veteran officer, a man who has walked the same beat for 15 years. He knows the town's rhythms, its people, its dark corners. He is not a brilliant detective from a novel. He is a methodical, patient policeman who has learned that most crimes are solved not with flashes of insight, but with paperwork and persistence. And lately, the paperwork has been telling him a disturbing story. HES reviewing the coroner's reports and the logs of items recovered from the river. It's a grim catalogue of the town's detritus, but a pattern is emerging, a pattern that makes the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. In the last 6 months, the bodies of no fewer than 5 infants have been pulled from the River Kennet in the nearby Thames. 5. The official cause of death in each case was inconclusive. Listed as found dead, with the assumption of stillbirth and panic disposal. This is the standard, easy explanation. Miller has seen cases like that before, but this feels different. The first was found by a bargeman, snagged on his anchor chain. A tiny, nameless thing. 2 months later, 2 boys fishing for eels found another, wrapped in a piece of old sacking near the canal lock. Then another, washed up on the mudflats after a heavy rain. What bothers Constable Miller is not just the number, but the similarities. 2 of the infants had a faint, almost invisible mark on the neck. The coroner had dismissed it as post-mortem discoloration. Miller isn't so sure. And one of the bodies had been wrapped in a piece of brown paper that was still partially intact. He remembers seeing it. It was just ordinary wrapping paper, but it was tied with a very specific, neat knot, a knot he feels he has seen before on another bundle. Another case, long forgotten. This is how real detective work begins, not with a smoking gun, but with a quiet accumulation of details that just don't feel right. It's the kind of work that often goes unnoticed and unreferred. His superiors are not interested. Infant deaths among the poor are a sad, but unremarkable, fact of life. They are a social problem, not a police matter. They encourage him to focus on more important things, like petty theft and public drunkenness. But Miller can't let it go. He has children of his own. The thought of these tiny bodies, cast away like so much rubbish, offends something deep in his soul. He starts his own, unofficial investigation. He spends his evenings, like tonight, going back through the old files, making notes in a small, black ledger. He talks to the bargemen, the lockkeepers, the fishermen. Has they seen anything unusual? A woman walking near the river late at night. He gets nothing. The answers are always the same. The river's full of all sorts. Noah. It's a sad world. Some historians argue that the eventual downfall of many baby farmers was not due to a single, brilliant piece of detective work, but to the dogged, quiet persistence of a handful of ordinary constables like Miller. These were men who saw a pattern where others saw only isolated tragedies, who trusted their gut instinct that something was deeply wrong. Their role is often overlooked in the more sensational tellings of the story, but it was crucial. Tonight, Miller is cross-referencing the dates of the discoveries with the dates of local inquests. He's looking for connections, however faint. He finds a report of a woman, a Mrs. Cho, whose infant lodger died of convulsions 3 months ago. The doctor signed the certificate. Everything was in order, but Miller makes a note. The address is in a neighborhood not far from the river. It's a dead end, by coincidence, probably. He leans back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. He feels like he's chasing a ghost. A phantom who leaves no trace but a heartbreaking trail of tiny bodies. The station is quiet. The clock on the wall ticks loudly in the silence. Miller looks at his ledger, at the 5 small crosses he has drawn, 1 for each infant. He knows, with a certainty he cannot explain, that there is a 6th, and a 7th, and that they will keep coming until he can find the ghost. He picks up his pen and goes back to the reports, searching for another misplaced detail, another note that doesn't look quite right. The breakthrough comes, as it so often does, not from a brilliant deduction in a quiet office, but from a stroke of luck in the sharp eyes of a working man. It is a brisk autumn morning, a few weeks after Constable Miller's late-night review of the files. A man named John Nash is steering his barge, laden with coal, down a stretch of the Thames just outside Reading. The river is running high and fast after a recent storm. Nash is a man who knows the river better than he knows the back of his own hand. He knows its modes, its currents, its hidden snags. As he pulls his way through a shallow section, he sees something caught in a thicket of reeds near the bank. It is a bundle, a large, sudden parcel wrapped in what looks like a piece of old carpet or a heavy bag. It is not unusual to see debris like this, but there is something about its shape, something oddly specific, that catches his eye. His first thought is that it might be valuable. People throw all sorts of things into the river, He nudges the barge closer, using his long pole to fish the object out of the reeds. It's heavier than he expected. A dead, cumbersome weight. He hauls it onto the deck of the barge with a grunt. It is a carpet bag, a cheap, common type of luggage. It is tied shut with several lengths of thick cord. It is soaked through and covered in river slime. As he moves it, he feels something shift inside. A hard, lumpy object. He pulls at the knots. They are tight and complicated. Annoyed, he takes out his pocket-knife and saws through the wet cord. He pulls the bag open. The first thing he sees is the corner of a white napkin or cloth. Then, he sees the small, pale foot of an infant. Nash recoils, a curse catching in his throat. He is a hardened man, not easily shocked. But this is different. He has seen drowned animals before. But this is something else. Forcing himself to look closer, he can see the body of a baby girl, wrapped in the cloth. And he can see what made the parcel so heavy. A large brick had been tied to the infant's body. This was no accident. This was no panic disposal of a stillborn. This was a deliberate, cold-blooded act of concealment. This discovery is a pivotal moment. It changes everything. Unlike the other bodies that have been found, this one is contained. It has been partially protected from the river's currents and the nibbling of fish. And most importantly, it comes with its own packaging. The bag, the cord, the brick, it comes with clues. Nash knows he has to report this. He pulls his barge to the nearest dock and sends a boy running for the police. Within the hour, Constable Miller is there, standing on the deck of the barge, looking down at the grim discovery. He feels no sense of triumph, only a cold, heavy anger. This is the sixth child. He knew it. He examines the scene with a careful, methodical eye. He notes the type of cord used, the way the knots were tied. He looks at the brick, which appears to be a common house brick, but he takes it as evidence anyway. And then he looks at the bag itself. It is waterlogged and stained, but he can see it was once a dark, patterned carpet bag. But the most crucial piece of evidence is not the bag, but what was used to wrap the body inside it. It wasn't a blanket or a piece of sacking. It was a large sheet of brown paper, now a sodden pulp. Miller, remembering the fragment of paper from a previous case, feels a jolt of recognition. Carefully, using the tip of his penknife, he begins to pry the layers of wet paper apart. It is a slow, painstaking process. Most of it disintegrates in his fingers. But then, he finds a section, pressed against the inside of the bag, that is partially preserved, and on it, faint but still legible in places, is writing, ink from a pen. It looks like an address. He can make out a few letters, a name, tone, and a street name, partially obscured by a water stain, and, miraculously, the house number. This is the mistake. This is the flaw in the killer's supposedly perfect system. In her haste, or perhaps out of sheer arrogance and repetition, she has used a piece of scrap paper to wrap the body. A piece of paper that tied this anonymous, discarded infant directly back to a name and a place. Historians often point to this kind of mistake as the undoing of many serial criminals. They become complacent. They develop a routine, a ritual, and in that routine, they cut corners. They reuse a certain type of string. They use paper from their own home. They believe they are invisible, and in that belief, they leave a trail. The debate continues whether this is a subconscious desire to be caught, or simply the inevitable carelessness that comes from believing you are smarter than everyone else. Miller takes out his notebook. He carefully transcribes what he can see of the address. It is not much. It's a fragment, a ghost of a clue. But it's more than he has ever had before. It is the first solid thread he can pull on. He looks from the piece of paper to the tiny, still body. "We're coming to you," he whispers. "Whoever you are, we're coming." Back at the station, the atmosphere has changed. The discovery in the river has elevated the case from a nagging suspicion in Constable Miller's notebook to a full-blown murder inquiry. An inspector from the detective department at Scotland Yard has been sent down to Reading to lead the investigation, a clear sign of its new importance. Miller, with his years of quiet, local knowledge, is now a crucial part of the team. The center of their attention is the sodden piece of brown paper. It is laid out carefully on a blotter in the middle of the inspector's desk, drying slowly under the heat of a lamp. It is a fragile, almost sacred, object. The address is the key. They all know it. But it is maddeningly incomplete. The name appears to be Mrs. Thomas. The house number is clearly a 26. But the street name is the problem. A large water stain has obliterated the middle of the word. All they can make out is Cavershmore, and then a smudge. Cavershmroad, Cavershmrise, Cavershmroad. Reading has a whole district named Caversham, with dozens of streets that could fit. The inspector, a sharp, impatient man named Wallace, is frustrated. It's not enough, he says, pacing the small office. We can't go knocking on every door in Caversham. She'll hear we're coming and be gone before we get to the right street. But Miller has an idea. The paper, sir, he says, pointing a thick finger at the clue. It's a specific type. It's not butcher's paper. It's thinner. Look at the texture. They examine it more closely. Miller is right. It's a finer quality of wrapping paper, the kind used by a draper's shop or a high-end stationer. Let's trace the paper, Miller suggests. There can't be that many shops in Reading that use this exact type. This is the beginning of a long, slow, painstaking process of elimination, the very essence of Victorian police work. With no fingerprinting, no DNA, no advanced forensics, detectives had to rely on shoe leather, on interviews, and on the careful tracing of mundane objects. Was a particular type of button sold at a local haberdashery? Was a specific brand of ink used by a certain clerk? It was a science of the small, the ordinary. Detectives are dispatched to every draper's shop, every stationer, every high street merchant in Reading. They carry with them a small, dry sample of the paper. The questions are always the same. Do you recognize this wrapping paper? Do you sell it? Do you have a customer named Mrs. Thomas? For days? They get nothing. Shopkeeper after shopkeeper shakes their head. No, they use a different supplier. No, the name Thomas is common. But no one springs to mind. The trail feels like it's growing cold. Then, they get a break. A young assistant at a large drapery in the town center recognizes the paper. Yes, she says, that's our paper. We have it specially made, with a faint watermark. See. She holds it up to the light, and there it is, a barely visible insignia of the shop's name. The detective's heart sleeps. And the name, they ask, Mrs. Thomas. The girl thinks for a moment, then her face brightens. Oh yes, Mr. Thomas. A very good customer. Comes in every few months. A quiet, respectable sort of lady. A former nurse. I believe she told me once. A former nurse. The detail fits, lending a veneer of respectability that would be perfect for luring in desperate mothers. Do you have her address? The inspector asks, his voice tight with anticipation. The drapery, like many shops of the era, keeps a ledger for customers who have accounts or request deliveries. The girl goes to fetch it. The detectives wait, the silence in the shop thick with tension. She returns, running her finger down a page. Here she is. The girl says, Mrs. Thomas, 26 Caversham Road, Caversham Road. The missing piece. They have her. They have the address. The debate among historians of criminology is often about this pivotal moment in an investigation. Is it luck, or is it the inevitable result of methodical police work? The bargeman finding the parcel was luck, but tracing the paper was method. It was the combination of the two that cracked the case. It's a classic example of how a killer's belief in their own anonymity can be their undoing. Mrs. Thomas likely never imagined that the simple paper she used to wrap a parcel would have a watermark, a tiny detail that would lead the law directly to her front door. Back at the station, Inspector Wallace looks at the full address written in Miller's neat hand. "Right," he says, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "We have her. But we are not going to just go knocking. She's clever. She'll have a story ready. We need more than just a piece of paper. We need to catch her in the act. The hunt is over. Now, the trap must be set." Inspector Wallace knows that a direct assault on the house is risky. If Mrs. Thomas is as cunning as they suspect, she will have disposed of any incriminating evidence. A search might turn up nothing, and she would simply deny everything. The address on the paper could be explained away as a coincidence. They need something more. They need to catch her red-handed. "We need a baby," Wallace says, thinking aloud in the smoky office. "We need to send a lamb to the slaughter. But this time, we'll be waiting." And so, the plan for a decoy operation is born. It's a bold, slightly theatrical, and highly unusual tactic for the time. They will use a policewoman, or more accurately, the wife of a police constable, to pose as a desperate, unmarried mother. She will answer one of Mrs. Thomas' own advertisements, which are still appearing regularly in the papers. She will arrange a meeting, pay the money, and hand over a baby, which, in this case, will be a police parcel weighted to feel like an infant. Then, they will follow Mrs. Thomas home and arrest her with the evidence in her hands. The role of the decoy falls to a woman named Sarah, the young wife of one of the constables. She is a good actress, and with her plain clothes and a convincing story of woe, she can easily pass for a disgraced domestic servant. This use of a female operative, even an unofficial one, was quite progressive for the Victorian era. Policewomen were not a formal part of the force yet, but their value in cases involving women and children was becoming increasingly apparent to forward-thinking detectives like Wallace. Sarah, playing her part, writes a letter filled with the usual desperate pleading. As expected, a reply soon comes from a Mrs. Harding, offering a loving home for the price of £5 and suggesting a meeting. The location is familiar, the bustling concourse of Paddington Station. The trap is now officially set. On the appointed day, the station is swarming with plainclothes policemen. They are disguised as porters, as businessmen reading newspapers, as tired travellers dozing on benches. Constable Miller is there, his familiar, reassuring bulk position near a bookstall, from where he has a clear view of the ticket office. Inspector Wallace is pretending to argue with a ticket clerk. Sarah arrives, looking pale and nervous, which is perfect for her role. She is clutching a bundle wrapped in a white shawl. The bundle contains a few old cloths and a small, heavy weight to give it a realistic feel. She stands in the agreed-upon spot, her eyes darting around the crowd. Right on time, Mrs. Thomas appears. She is the picture of respectable anonymity in her dark green cloak, a Bible tucked under her arm. She approaches Sarah with that same warm, disarming smile you remember so well. The detectives watch, holding their breath, as the scene plays out exactly as Sarah had described from the letters. The gentle words of reassurance, the talk of a country cottage. Mrs. Thomas' hand goes to Sarah's arm. "You poor dear," she says, her voice full of practiced sympathy. "You have been so brave." They watch as Sarah, her eyes welling with convincing tears, hands over the envelope of marked banknotes. They watch as the wicker basket is exchanged. And then, they watch the final, terrible moment as Sarah hands over the bundle. Mrs. Thomas takes it, cradling it in her arms. "Don't you worry about a thing, my dear," she says. "The little one will be safe with me. Go on now, don't look back." Sarah turns and walks away, disappearing into the crowd as instructed. Mrs. Thomas watches her go for a moment, then turns and heads, not for the Bristol train, but for the local line back to Reading. The chase is on. Several detectives, trying to look as casual as possible, board the same train, sitting in different carriages. When Mrs. Thomas gets off at Reading, two more detectives are on the platform, pretending to greet a relative. They follow her at a discreet distance as she walks through the familiar streets, the bundle held in her arms. She arrives at 26 Caversham Road. She lets herself in. The detectives take up positions at the front and back of the house, hidden in doorways and alleys. They wait. They need to give her time. Time to unwrap the bundle. Time to reveal her intentions. This moment is a significant point of debate for legal historians. The concept of entrapment, of luring a person into committing a crime, was a murky area in Victorian law. Was this a legitimate sting operation, or were the police acting as agents provocateurs? The courts of the era generally sided with the police, especially in heinous cases like this. But the ethical questions were certainly present. Inside the house, Mrs. Thomas places the bundle on the sofa. She is tired from the journey. She decides to make a cup of tea before dealing with the baby. She unwraps the shawl and finds a collection of rags and a small lead weight. For a second, she is confused. Then, a cold wave of pure terror washes over her. She understands. It's a trap. She looks wildly around the room, her mind racing. And at that exact moment, there is a loud, authoritative banging on the front door. The banging on the door is like a thunderclap in the quiet house. It's not the polite tap of a visitor. It is the heavy, insistent fist of the law. Police, open the door. A voice shouts from the other side. Mrs. Thomas is frozen for a moment, a cornered animal. Her mind, usually so cool and calculating, is a whirlwind of panic. The police. You. So, the decoy. The bundle of rags. It all clicks into place with sickening clarity. She looks at the marked banknotes on the table, the evidence of her transaction. She thinks of the letters in her desk. She thinks of what might be buried in the small patch of garden out back. Her instinct for self-preservation takes over. She snatches the banknotes, runs to the back of the house, and tries to shove them into the lit stove. But before the paper can catch fire, the back door bursts open, splintering off its hinges. Two constables fill the doorway. Stay where you are, one of them commands. At the same time, the front door gives way with a crash, and Inspector Wallace and Constable Miller storm into the front parlor. The trap has sprung. The house is sealed. There is no escape. Mrs. Thomas stands in the kitchen, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. The money still clutched in her hand. She says nothing. The calm, motherly persona has vanished, replaced by a hard, defiant silence. Now the search begins. While to Constable's guard Mrs. Thomas, who has been placed in a hard-backed chair in the parlor, Miller and Wallace start to methodically take the house apart. It is a grim and deeply unsettling task. This is the moment the respectable facade is literally torn away to reveal the rottenums beneath. In the parlor, they find the decoy bundle, the rags and the lead weight, lying on the sofa, on the desk. They find the box of letters. Wallace opens it and begins to read. His face grows grimmer with each page. He reads the evidence of a dozen, perhaps 24, other transactions, a catalogue of false names, false promises, and desperate mothers. Your letter is among them. Miller heads to the back of the house. The kitchen is squalid, with a few dirty plates in the sink and a lingering sour smell. He finds the small, dark blue bottle of Godfrey's cordial on a shelf, half empty. He uncorks it and sniffs. The sweet, cloying scent of opium is unmistakable. He pockets his evidence. Then, he pushes open the door to a small, adjoining scullery. And there, on a filthy mattress on the floor, he finds them, two infants. They are emaciated, their skin stretched tight over their tiny bones. One is so still, so silent, that for a terrifying moment Miller thinks he is too late. But then he sees the faintest flutter of a chest. They are alive. Just barely. He calls for Wallace, his voice thick with a mixture of horror and relief. They have saved these two. At least. The search then moves to the outside of the house. The garden is little more than a small, muddy yard, enclosed by a high brick wall. A few sickly-looking cabbages grow in one corner. The rest is just bare, trodden down earth. Another constable arrives with a spade. They begin to dig. They start in a corner where the earth looks recently disturbed. The work is slow and grim. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the small yard. After about 10 minutes of digging, the spade hits something soft. The constable stops, his face pale. Carefully, he scrapes away the soil with his hands. He uncovers a piece of rotting cloth. And then, the tiny, perfectly formed bone of an infant child. They find 2 more bodies buried in that small yard. 2 more small skeletons, wrapped in rags. Each discovery is a fresh wave of horror. This wasn't just a business of quick, river-bound disposals. This house, this ordinary suburban brick house, was a graveyard. Some of the most debated aspects of these historical cases involve the evidence found at the scene. How reliable were the search methods? How well was the chain of custody for evidence maintained? In an era before modern forensic science, the case often rested on the sheer, overwhelming weight of circumstantial evidence. The letters, the poisons, the pawnbroker's tickets for baby clothes, and, most damningly, the bodies themselves. Back inside, Inspector Wallace stands before Mrs. Thomas. He holds up the box of letters. "We have your correspondence," he says, his voice cold and steady. "We have the poison. We have the marked money you took this afternoon. And we have found what you buried in the garden. Your business is over." For the first time, Mrs. Thomas speaks. Her voice is not the warm, gentle tone you heard at the station. It is a low, venomous snarl. "You can't prove anything." It is Constable Miller who first notices it. Amidst the chaos of the raid, the splintered doors, the overturned furniture, the grim discoveries in the garden, there is something else, a smell. It's faint, but pervasive. It's a sickly, sweet, cloying odor that clings to the back of the throat. It's a smell that, once you have encountered it, you never, ever forget. It is the smell of human decomposition. Miller has smelled it before, on the banks of the river, in the back rooms of tenements, where the lonely have passed away unnoticed. But here, inside a house, it is different. It is trapped, concentrated. It seems to have seeped into the very fabric of the building, into the floorboards, the cheap, greasy wallpaper, the threadbare curtains. He stands in the middle of the parlor, his head tilted, trying to locate its source. It's not coming from the garden. That smell is of damp earth. This is older, more ingrained. He realizes, with a cold dread, that the whole house is saturated with it. This isn't the site of a few recent crimes. This is a place where death has been a resident for a very long time. He follows a scent. It seems strongest near the fireplace. He kneels, sniffing around the hearth. Nothing. Then he looks at the floorboards in the corner of the room. A couple of them look slightly askew, as if they have been lifted and replaced many times. He takes out his bucket and thumb pries at the edge of one. The board comes up with a protesting creak. The smell hits him like a physical blow, a slow, gagging wave of putrescence. He recoils, his hand flying to his mouth. Inspector Wallace, seeing Miller's reaction, comes over. He peers into the dark space beneath the floor. In the gloom, they can just make out a number of small, lumpy bundles, wrapped in dark, oilskin-like fabric. They have found her larder. This is where she stored the bodies, sometimes for weeks, waiting for a convenient, dark night to make the trip to the river. This discovery is a turning point, not just for the investigation, but for the psychological understanding of the killer. This isn't just about efficient disposal anymore. This is something else. To live in a house, day after day, with a smell, with a knowledge of what lies just inches beneath your feet. It speaks to a level of dissociation, a complete severing of all normal human empathy that is almost impossible to comprehend. Historians and forensic psychologists who study female serial killers often point to this kind of behavior. Unlike many male counterparts who might be driven by violent, explosive rage, killers like Mrs. Thomas often exhibit a chillingly domestic, housekeeping approach to their crimes. The bodies are not just victims. They are a problem of clutter, of storage, to be managed and tidied away. The act of hiding them under the floorboards is a grotesque parody of squirreling away preserves for the winter. The constables begin the horrific task of removing the bundles from under the floor. They find 3. Each one is carefully wrapped and tied. It is clear that this was a system, a routine. This is what she did when the weather was bad, or when she felt the towpath was being washed. She would simply file the problem away for later. The smell of evidence is more than just a physical sensation. It is a legal and moral one. The faint marks on her neck can be debated. A mother's desperate letter can be twisted to sound like she was a willing participant. But the undeniable, overwhelming physical evidence of multiple bodies, hidden within the killer's own home, is something no jury can ignore. It is the final, irrefutable proof that this was not a series of unfortunate accidents or acts of panic desperation. This was a systematic, ongoing enterprise of murder for profit. As the last of the small bundles is carried out into the yard, a heavy silence falls over the raiding party. The sheer scale of the operation is becoming clear. The 2 infants rescued from the kitchen, the 2 skeletons in the garden, the 3 bodies from under the floorboards, and the one found in the river that started it all. That is 8 children, 8 lives, snuffed out and hidden away, and they all know, with a sickening certainty, that this is likely just the tip of the iceberg. How many more are at the bottom of the river? Their stories lost forever. Mrs. Thomas, sitting in her chair, watches them. Her face is a stony mask, but her eyes follow the small bundles as they are carried past her. For the first time, a flicker of something, fear, defeat, crosses her features. The smell is out. The secret is out. Her respectable house has given up its dead, and their silent testimony is shouting louder than any words she could ever speak. The arrest and the subsequent discoveries at 26 Cavish Road create an immediate and massive sensation. The story is splashed across the front pages of every newspaper in the country, from the London dailies to the smallest local weeklies. The press descends on reading, reporters interviewing shocked neighbors, sketching the grim facade of the house, and scrambling for any salacious detail they can find. And at the center of this media storm is Mrs. Thomas, or as the world now learns is her real name, Amelia Dyer. She is no longer a faceless, sincere friend from a newspaper ad. She is now a public monster, a newly minted celebrity of crime. When she is brought to the courthouse for her preliminary hearing, huge crowds gather in the streets, jostling for a glimpse of her. They are expecting to see a monster, a cackling villainess, a fiend in human form. What they see is a short, stout, middle-aged woman in a plain black dress and bonnet. She looks like 1,000 other women you might pass on the street. She looks like someone's grandmother. She looks utterly, terrifyingly normal. This disconnect between her appearance and her alleged crimes becomes the central fascination of the story. The newspapers give her a host of theatrical, headline-grabbing nicknames: the Ogress of Reading, the Baby Butcher, the Angel Maker. They paint her as a singular figure of evil, a dark fairy tale which come to life in the suburbs. Her trial is the sensation of the year. The public gallery is packed every day. People line up for hours to get a seat, as if attending the opening night of a popular play. For the Victorian public, a sensational murder trial was a form of mass entertainment, a gripping drama played out in real life, and a female serial killer. That was the rarest, most fascinating spectacle of all. You, in your new life in another part of the country, read about the case with a sickening, paralyzing sense of dread. You see the name Amelia Dyer and the address in reading. And you know, this is her. This is your Mrs. Thomas. The kind, motherly woman you met at the station. The country cottage. The yellow curtains. It was all a lie. A lie you paid for. A lie that cost your child her life. The newspaper reports the discovery of the bodies. The infant found in the river wrapped in brown paper. And you feel a certainty so cold and so absolute it stops your breath. That was your baby. Your daughter. The daughter you were told would be named Rose. The prosecution lays out its case, piece by methodical piece. They present the decoy operation. The marked banknotes. They present the box of letters, reading out the desperate pleas of mothers and Dyer's crying lie sweet, manipulative replies. They present the bottles of opiate cordial. A pawnbroker is brought in to testify that he bought a small, silver locket from the accused, which he identifies in court. Your locket. Then comes the most harrowing evidence. The doctors and police constables testify about the discoveries in the house and garden. They speak of the smell, of the tiny skeletons, of the preserved bodies under the floorboards. They unroll the length of white dressmaker's tape that was found around the neck of the infant from the river, holding it up for the jury to see. It is a simple, innocuous object, now imbued with a terrifying significance. Through it all, Amelia Dyer sits in the dock. Impassive. She shows no emotion. She listens to the litany of her crimes as if hearing about the actions of a stranger. This stoic, unreadable demeanor is endlessly debated by the press and the public. Is it the sign of a cold, heartless monster, utterly devoid of remorse? Or is it the quiet dignity of a woman wrongly accused? This trial, and others like it, captivated the public imagination for a reason. They exposed the dark, festering underbelly of Victorian society. The case laid bare the hypocrisy of a society that preached about the sanctity of motherhood while simultaneously punishing undo est racising unmarried mothers, driving them into the arms of predators like Dyer. There's a point of debate among social historians. Did the public flock to the trial to see justice done? Or was it a form of collective penance? A way to gaze upon the horrific, logical conclusion of their own rigid moral codes without having to accept any of the blame themselves, by turning Dyer into a singular ogress. They could avoid looking at the systemic cruelty that created her market in the first place. As the mountain of evidence against her grows, it becomes clear that a straightforward denial of the crimes is impossible. The bodies, the letters, the witnesses, it is an insurmountable case. So her defense team pivots to the only viable strategy they have left, a classic legal maneuver of the era, the insanity defense. They will not argue that she didn't commit the acts. They will argue that she was not responsible for them. They will attempt to prove that Amelia Dyer was a woman of unsound mind, a victim of moral insanity, and therefore not culpable for her actions. If successful, this would save her from the gallows and see her committed to a criminal lunatic asylum, likely for the rest of her life. The defense begins to build a picture of a troubled, unstable woman. They bring witnesses to the stand who testify to her eccentric behavior. A former neighbor claims she spoke of seeing visions. A doctor who once treated her for a minor ailment recalls her having hysterical fits. They delve into her past, revealing that she had been committed to a mental asylum on several occasions. This, at first, seems like a powerful point. A history of institutionalization is strong evidence of mental instability. However, the prosecution has an answer. They produce evidence suggesting that Dyer's stays in the asylums were a calculated ruse. She was a former asylum nurse herself and knew the system intimately. She knew exactly which symptoms to feign to get herself admitted. Why would she do this? The asylums of the era were often used as a place to hide. When she felt the police might be getting close, or when a mother became too inquisitive, she would have herself committed for a few months until the trouble blew over. It was a strategic retreat, a way of disappearing in plain sight. The defense also points to her history of laudanum use, the same opium-based tincture she used on the infants. They argue she was an addict. Her mind clouded and her judgment impaired by the constant use of the drug. She was not a calculating killer, but a pathetic, drug-addled creature who didn't know what she was doing. This brings the trial to a fascinating, and still debated, intersection of law and early psychology. What was the legal definition of insanity in the Victorian era? The prevailing standard was the MNAG age 10 rule, which essentially stated that a person was insane if, due to a disease of the mind, they were unable to know the nature and quality of the act they were doing, or if they did know it, that they did not know it was wrong. The prosecution's entire case is built to dismantle this defense. They systematically show that every one of Dyer's actions was rational, calculated, and deliberate. Is it the act of an insane woman to place carefully worded advertisements in newspapers? The prosecutor thunders, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. Is it the act of a madwoman to arrange clandestine meetings in busy train stations to ensure anonymity? Is it the sign of a diseased mind to demand a cash payment, to check the quality of the clothes, to use a weighted bag to sink a body in a river? He paints a picture not of a madwoman, but of a meticulous and cunning businesswoman. He points to the letters she wrote to the mothers after the children were already dead, extorting more money with lies about their well-being. This is not insanity, he declares, pointing a finger at Dyer in the dock. This is a cold, calculating fraud, layered upon the most wicked of murders. The question of Amelia Dyer's sanity is one that historians and criminologists still argue about. Was she a psychopath, completely lacking in empathy but otherwise rational? Or was she genuinely mentally ill, her illness coexisting with a high degree of criminal cunning? Some modern scholars have suggested she may have had a severe personality disorder, a concept that didn't exist in the Victorian medical lexicon. They argue that the Victorians' rigid distinction between mad and bad was too simple to capture the complex reality of a mind like hers. As you read the conflicting reports in the paper, you find yourself torn. Part of you wants to believe she was mad. The idea that a sane person, a rational human being, could smile at you, promise to love your child, and then commit such a monstrous act is almost too much to bear. Insanity would provide a kind of reason, a twisted logic to the horror, but as you read the prosecutor's words, you know he is right. The woman you met was not frantic or out of control. She was calm, she was professional, she was sane. But that, you realize, is the most terrifying thing of all. The trial reaches its climax. The final arguments have been made. The prosecutor's voice still hangs in the air, his accusations of cold, calculated evil echoing in the hushed courtroom. The defense lawyer has made his final, impassioned plea, painting a portrait of a broken, misguided woman, a victim of her own troubled mind. Now, it is up to the 12 men in the jury box. The judge turns to them. He is a formidable figure in his horse-hair wig and red robes, a symbol of the unassailable power of the law. He begins his summing up, his voice a dry, impartial drone. He reminds the jury of the facts of the case. He explains, in careful, precise language, the legal definition of insanity according to the MNAG age 10 rule. You must ask yourselves this. He instructs them, peering over his spectacles, when the accused tied the tape around the infant's neck. Did she know that it would cause death? And if she did know, did she know that it was wrong? Not just legally wrong, but morally wrong according to the standards of a reasonable man. He speaks for over an hour, meticulously going over the evidence, the letters, the money, the bodies. He reminds them to set aside their emotions, their shock and their revulsion, and to consider only the evidence presented in the court. Amelia Dyer watches the judge, her expression as blank as it has been for the entire trial. What is she thinking in this final moment? Is she remembering the faces of the mothers, the weight of the infants in her arms, or is she simply calculating her odds, her mind still working on the problem of her own survival? It is a mystery that will go with her to the grave. Some historians have speculated, based on her stoic demeanor, that she had a deeply fatalistic worldview, accepting her fate with the same emotional detachment with which she conducted her business. Finally, the judge finishes. "Gentlemen of the jury," he says, his voice dropping to a solemn tone, "you may now retire and consider your verdict." The 12 men, all shopkeepers, clerks, and local merchants, file out of the jury box. A heavy, expectant silence descends on the courtroom. The crowd shifts in their seats, whispering amongst themselves. How long will it take? A complex case, especially one with an insanity defense, can mean hours, sometimes even days, of deliberation. The reporters scribble furiously in their notebooks, preparing 2 versions of their story, one for each possible outcome. You read about this moment in the evening paper, your hands gripping the page. You feel as if you are in that courtroom yourself, holding your breath, waiting. This verdict is not just about Amelia Dyer. It feels, in some small, personal way, like a verdict on you, on your choice, on your guilt. The wait is surprisingly, shockingly, short. Less than 5 minutes later, a bailiff enters and announces that the jury has reached a decision. A gasp ripples through the public gallery. So soon. There is no doubt now. A swift verdict means a unanimous one. The 12 men file back into the jury box. Their faces are grim, set like stone. They do not look at the woman in the dock. This is always seen as a bad sign for the accused. The clerk of the court rises. "Gentlemen of the jury," he asks, his voice ringing with formal tradition, "have you reached a verdict upon which you are all agreed?" The foreman, a stout man with a large mustache, stands up. "We have," he says, his voice firm. "And do you find the prisoner, Amelia Dyer, guilty or not guilty of the charge of murder?" The foreman looks directly at the judge. He does not hesitate. "Guilty." A wave of sound washes over the courtroom. A murmur of approval from the gallery, quickly silenced by the bailiffs. The reporters are already sprinting from the room to file their stories. Amelia Dyer does not react. She does not flint. She simply stares straight ahead. The judge now performs the final, grim ritual. He produces a small square of black cloth, the black cap, and places it on top of his wig. This is the solemn signal that a sentence of death is about to be passed. He addresses the prisoner directly. "Amelia Dyer," he says, his voice resonating with the full weight of the state's authority. "You have been found guilty of a crime of the most heinous and abominable nature. You have preyed upon the vulnerable, and turned a mother's love into an instrument of death for your own wicked profit. Justice demands but one sentence." He pauses. The silence in the room absolute. "The sentence of this court is that you be taken from this place to a lawful prison and thence to a place of execution, where you shall be hanged by the neck until you are dead. And may the Lord have mercy upon your soul." The guilty verdict and the death sentence are not the end of the story. In fact, in a much larger sense, they are the beginning. The trial of Amelia Dyer, broadcast in sensational detail to every corner of the country, has done more than just condemn one woman. It has ripped the respectable curtain away from a dark corner of Victorian life, and the public is horrified by what it has seen. The case becomes a catalyst for a massive public outcry. For weeks, the newspapers are filled with editorials, letters to the editor, and impassioned columns from social reformers. They all ask the same questions. How could this have happened? How could a woman, or a network of women, be allowed to operate such a monstrous trade for so long, right under the noses of society? Suddenly, everyone is an expert on the evils of baby farming. The agony columns that you once saw as a source of secret hope are now condemned as a marketplace for murder. The patent medicines like Godfrey's cordial, once seen as a harmless convenient, are exposed as poisons. The lax system of death certification, which allowed a local doctor to simply sign off on an infant's death without a proper examination, is revealed to be a killer's charter. You read these articles with a complex mix of vindication and shame. On the one hand, You feel a sense of relief. You are not a fool. You are the victim of a sophisticated, predatory system that has now been exposed to the light. But on the other hand, every article that condemns the wickedness of the unnatural mothers who would give away their children feels like a personal accusation. You are one of them. Your secret story now a part of this loud, public scandal. The pressure for reform becomes a political force that Parliament can no longer ignore. For years, campaigners have been trying to get laws passed to better protect infants, but their efforts were always met with indifference. Now, with the spectre of Amelia Dyer haunting the public imagination, the mood has changed. The government is forced to act. This leads directly to the passage of the Infant Life Protection Act of 1897. It is not a perfect piece of legislation, but it is a monumental step forward. The law mandates that anyone nursing an infant under the age of 5 for more than 48 hours, for profit, must register with the local authorities. Their homes are now subject to inspection by the parish to ensure the conditions are safe and sanitary. It also gives the inspectors the power to set the number of infants a single carer is allowed to look after. This is a fundamental shift from a private transaction to a matter of public oversight. It is the beginning of the end for the anonymous, unregulated world of the baby farmer. The act makes it much harder for someone like Dyer to simply take a baby and disappear. No, there is a paper trail. There are inspectors. There are questions. There is a fascinating debate among legal historians about the true impact of this act. Some argue it was a landmark piece of social legislation, the first crucial step towards a modern child welfare system. Others are more cynical. They point out that the law was full of loopholes. For example, it didn't apply to people who took in only one baby at a time, which allowed a smaller scale, and often equally deadly, form of neglect to continue. It also did not cover the lump sum adoptions, the complete surrender for a single premium, which was Dyer's primary business model. It took several more acts, passed over the next few decades, to fully close these gaps. But what the Act of 1897 undeniably did was to send a powerful message. It stated, for the first time in British law, that the life of an infant, even the illegitimate child of a poor, unmarried mother, was a matter of state concern. The child was no longer simply the property of its parents, to be disposed of as they saw fit. It was a citizen, with a right to be protected. All of this happens because of the discovery of a small body in the river, because of a faint address on a piece of wrapping paper, because of the dogged persistence of a constable like Miller. The death of your child, and the deaths of countless others, had become the stones upon which a new, safer world for children is slowly, painfully, being built. It is a terrible, heartbreaking irony. The child you gave away in the desperate hope of giving her a life has, in her death, helped to secure the lives of thousands of children she would never meet. It is a legacy written in tears and tragedy, but it is a legacy nonetheless. The day of the execution comes. The newspapers print a small, stark notice. Amelia Dyer, it says, was hanged at Newgate Prison. It reports that she made a full confession in her final days. A long, rambling document that confirmed the police's worst fears, hinting at a scale of killing that was far greater than the evidence they had managed to uncover. You fold the newspaper and put it away. It is over. The monster has been punished. Justice, in its grim, final way, has been served. But there is no sense of relief. There is no closure. There is only the vast, silent emptiness that has become the permanent landscape of your heart. Your life goes on. The years pass. The Victorian era, with its rigid costs and suffocating morality, gives way to a new century. The world changes in ways you could never have imagined. Carriages are replaced by motor cars, gas lamps by electric lights. But in the quiet moments, in the dead of night, you are still there, on that platform at Paddington Station, your arms aching with a phantom weight. And all the while, the legacy of what happened is quietly, slowly reshaping the world. The Infant Life Protection Act of 1897 is just the beginning. It is followed by other laws, each one strengthening the one that came before. The Children Act of 1908, the Adoption of Children Act in 1926, which for the first time makes adoption a legal, formal process, overseen by the courts. The hidden, desperate transaction in a train station is replaced by a formal meeting in a sterile government office with a social worker. The cryptic newspaper advertisement is replaced by a thick file of paperwork. The entire system is designed to prevent another Amelia Dyer from ever flourishing again. It is built on a foundation of investigation, of oversight, of putting the child's welfare above all else. It is a system built on the ghosts of her victims. As these new systems evolve, a new kind of secrecy emerges. For much of the 20th century, the prevailing wisdom was that the best adoptions were closed. The original birth certificate was sealed, and an amended one was issued, listing the adoptive parents as the birth parents. The past was simply erased, written over. This led to a strange and little-known piece of social history, the era of the late discovery adoptee. Adults who would accidentally discover in their 40s or 50s, perhaps when applying for a passport, that the people who raised them were not their biological parents at all. The secret, it turned out, was harder to kill than the Victorians ever imagined. And this has led to one of the most profound and ongoing debates in the world of child welfare. A debate that echoes your own story. What is truly in the best interest of the child? Is it a clean break? The total erasure of a difficult past, as the closed adoption advocates argued? Or is it the truth? The modern consensus has shifted heavily towards open adoption. The idea that a child has a fundamental right to know their own story, to know the name of their birth mother, to understand the circumstances of their beginning, no matter how painful. Academics, adoptees, and social workers still argue fiercely about the right balance, about how much openness is healthy, and how much pain from the past is too much for a child to bear. You live long enough to see this change. 2. You grow old. Your hair turns grey. You watch the world that condemned you, the world that created Amelia Dyer, fade into the pages of history books. You see a new world emerge, one that has not solved the problem of poverty or desperation, but one that at least tries to protect its most vulnerable. One that has decided that no mother should have to turn to the shadows for a solution. And you wonder, in the long, quiet evenings of your old age, what your daughter would have thought. Would she have searched for you? Would she have understood? Or is it better that she never knew the story of the desperate girl, the kindly-looking woman, in the final, silent journey to a cold, dark river? You will never have the answer. All you have is the secret, a companion you have carried, silently, for a lifetime. And so, the story, with its sharp edges and its deep shadows, begins to soften now. You can let the details fade. Like watercolor paint in a gentle rain, the faces of the characters can grow indistinct, taking a final, silent bow before they recede into the quiet landscape of the past. The sounds of the Victorian city, the rumble of the omnibus, the hiss of the steam train, can dissolve into the gentle, rhythmic sound of your own breathing. The story has done its work. It has carried you from the world of the waking day, down a long and winding river. But now, that river is broadening, slowing. As it approaches the vast, calm sea of sleep, there is nothing more to understand, nothing more to follow. The current is gentle now, and you can simply float, supported and safe, letting it carry you towards the soft shores of your own dreams. The air around you feels calm. The quiet in the room deepens, becoming a warm and comfortable blanket. Our journey together tonight ends here, in this quiet place. Should you need another tale to accompany you further into rest, my library of stories is always open for you. May your dreams be kind. Good night.